With only two major comic book companies competing for the attention of millions of readers, it's expected that some overlap may occur in terms of the character appeal, design, and motivation. What has already proven to work for mass audiences is the most attractive thing a business can implement into its presentation, and the likes of DC and Marvel are exactly that, a business. As such, these two companies have both informed, inspired, and outright plundered each other for superhero concepts that may lead to a bigger event or launch. And to be fair, both brands have plenty of iconic characters worthy of inspiring copycats. However, for today, we are focusing on DC stolen goods and taking a look at how, when, and why the company of Batman decided to raid the shelves of Marvel. But before we see which of our favorite DC characters are knockoffs, make sure to subscribe to the channel for some plot armor today. After all, this is a new channel and we appreciate all the support we can get. This is every character DC stole from Marvel. Aquaman, stolen from Namor the Submariner. Namor readers are well acquainted with the Submariner's vengeful tendencies. Particularly when he is a part of a team, Namor presents a more aggressive plan of action. His natural ability to breathe water, as well as his manipulative powers of said water, further add to his intimidating presence. He is the id of the team, and this likely finds its origins in his people's history, first relayed to him and readers in Motion Picture Funny's Weekly Number 1. Published in 1939, the comic introduces the legendary underwater city of Atlantis as Namor's mother, Fen, tells of the historical strife between their people and those of the surface. It dates back to experiments being conducted directly above Atlantis and a mission by Fen to determine what exactly the humans were doing. She would fall in love with a commander, marry him, and eventually give birth to Namor. The issue ends with Fen proclaiming her son the leader of Atlantis' future invasion upon the surface dwellers, given a nearly genocidal ending to their first encounters with them. Cut to 1941. World War II has been unleashed upon the world, and as with most comic characters at the time, audiences attempted to understand the conflict through their favorite superheroes. A predecessor to DC, National Allied Publications recognized the potential of a character like Namor and created their own spin on it. Presented in More Fun Comics number 73, Aquaman is a similarly gifted undersea warrior who is likewise introduced battling a large human-skewed water vessel and given a backstory courtesy of a succinct flashback involving his parents' participation in the Atlantean human conflict. The main characteristic distinguishing the two is Aquaman's more heroic instincts, as he is at least shown rescuing civilians. Meanwhile, Namor murders two divers, then presents them as trophies. Like we mentioned before, he is a little aggressive. Guardian, stolen from Captain America. Superheroes are figures that help readers process events in their own lives and the world at large, which is, after all, the point of any fictional character. This is particularly poignant in times of war, as the panels of the page reflect the turmoil experienced overseas and at home. About 8 months before Aquaman would try to capture some of Namor's audience, Marvel's ancestor, Timely Comics, introduced Captain America in 1941. The Star-Spangled Avenger earned the public's respect by punching Adolf Hitler on his debut cover, Captain America Comics number 1. Then, a little over a year later, DC released the similarly titled Star-Spangled Comics number 7, introducing the character of Guardian. Both Cap and Guardian don a shield to combat villainy and are creations of the legendary comic book icon, Jack Kirby. So it is understandable why they look extremely similar. But they also have the same writer in Joe Simon, therefore bearing out the idea that Cap, at the very least, informed the development of Guardian. The latter is a policeman, the former a soldier, but both serve their communities and are found inadequate in some way. Steve Rogers is a physically frail young man before receiving the super soldier serum, while Jim Harper is overwhelmed by a group of thugs while on duty. This results in their donning of a costume and shield and proceeding to do their previous work even better. And if this doesn't cement Captain America's influence enough, allow me to regale you to the next entry. Red Hood, stolen from the Winter Soldier. That's right, DC lifted one of their most famous story arcs from their rival, and the saga of Bucky Barnes and Jason Todd last decades. So let's return to Captain America's debut in 1941, which also featured Bucky's first appearance. Barnes uncovers Rogers' identity and subsequently becomes his sidekick. Contrast that with Jason Todd's debut in Batman number 408, where he is stealing tires from the Batmobile, foreshadowing the pair's adversarial relationship to come. However, from this point on, Bucky and Jason's respective journeys mirror each other in significant ways, though the former always beats the latter to the punch. Bucky would perish during a mission with Cap in Avengers number 4, released in 1964. Jason would meet his end at the hands of the Joker in Batman number 427, released 2 decades later in 1988. A similar pattern would see Bucky and Jason receive their anti-heroic makeovers within a single month of each other in 2005. The former is revealed as the Winter Soldier in Captain America number 8, released in July, and the latter as Red Hood in Batman number 641, released in August. Not to mention both would eventually go on to don their respective predecessors' mantles. Odd that these sidekicks would take so many notes from each other, given how starkly different Batman and Captain America are. Rocket Red, stolen from Iron Man. Iron Man is one of Marvel's most premier characters, and his debut in Tales of Suspense number 39 in 1962 establishes why he is so unique. He is a pathway through the darkness of discourse surrounding the world's use of weapons of mass destruction, not to mention the mass propagation of said weapons around the globe. And yet, Tony Stark must construct another weapon to combat those already wreaking havoc. This endless cycle is a well-worn theme for Iron Man comics. Into the 1980s, and the character continues to embark on his own adventures as well as collaborating with others as part of the Avengers. Seeing Stark's perpetual popularity, DC hatches an idea. Imagine an Iron Man, yes, but he's Russian, therefore offering a different perspective on America. An outsider looking in, and that was the idea presented when Dmitry Pushkin debuted as Rocket Red in 1987's Green Lantern Corps number 209. Well, sort of. Dmitry isn't the Rocket Red, but a Rocket Red, as there is actually an entire brigade of them. The first soldier to become a Rocket Red is Joseph Denisovich, debuting an issue before in number 208. This may share comparisons to Stark's Iron Legion, but that is not the only shared trait between them. Both use armor with nearly identical abilities, including rocket-propelled flight, repulsor blasts, and the ability to manipulate technology. It seems having just any suit of armor isn't enough to become a cultural icon. You gotta have the personality to match, and while there may be an entire brigade of Dmitry Pushkins, there is only one Tony Stark. Bumblebee, stolen from the Wasp. Both Janet Van Dyke and Karen Beecher take inspiration for their ensembles from insects, but it seems that DC took more thematic choices from the former as well in introducing the latter. Karen Beecher shows up as the girlfriend of Mal Duncan, better known as the Herald in 1976's Teen Titans number 45, before adopting the Bumblebee moniker 3 issues later in number 48. She decides to help her boyfriend get a spot on the Titans by posing a villain and briefly battling the team before buzzing off, thereby allowing him the chance to display his prowess in combat. Impressed by her courage, Karen is invited to join the Teen Titans in issue 49 and serves a team alongside Mal. Sound familiar? It absolutely should, as it is the very same journey that Janet Van Dyke embarked on 13 years earlier in Tales to Astonish number 44, published by Marvel in 1963. Her story is significantly heavier though. Her father is killed after an experiment goes haywire, and she is encouraged by Hank Pym, operating as Ant-Man, to let the FBI handle the investigation. Janet is stubborn and animated in her desire to avenge her father though, impressing Hank enough to take her in as the Wasp, his sidekick. Tell me you see the resemblance. Two insect-themed characters impressing a mentor or a group of them enough to be brought under their wing. We can at least all agree that there are wings involved here, right? Zatanna, stolen from Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch has accumulated a wealth of goodwill in recent years thanks to her relatability and emotional honesty as a character. Debuting in Uncanny X-Men number 4 circa 1964, Wanda Maximoff began as a villainous sorcerer serving Magneto as part of his brotherhood of evil mutants. Her ability to harness magic and practically do anything with it made her a valuable asset in the lineup, tempered only by her consistently unstable mental state. 8 months pass by, and DC responds with their own magic user, Zatanna Zatara, appearing in Hawkman number 4 and boasting similar abilities to Wanda. Besides their powers, both Wanda and Zatanna are members of an offshoot of Homo sapiens, the former a Homo superior, mutants, and the latter a Homo magi, mages. However, Wanda's heritage would later be retconned again to have no familial connection to her presumed father, Magneto, and therefore cease calling herself a mutant. But speaking of fathers, both have dads who possess similar abilities. Magneto can alter and control metal like Zatanna's father, Zatara, shared his daughter's affinity to magic. A primary distinction between the two is in style. Wanda fashions herself a witch, while Zatanna embraces the stage magician approach. Despite this, they still end up with similar costumes. Alright DC fans, let's take a little break. Like me, you probably feel like nothing original remains in the realm of Gotham, Metropolis, and the greatest superhero roster ever. But wait, it is the greatest roster ever, so Marvel had to have lifted at least one character from DC, right? Right, in fact, Marvel has also stolen a fair amount of characters from DC, and as a sampling, here's a fun example. Deadpool. First introduced in 1991's The New Mutants number 98, his real name, Wade Wilson, is a sly hint at what DC vigilante inspired the so-called Merc with a Mouth. DC's resident go-to mercenary, Deathstroke, initially served as a foe of the Teen Titans in 1980, before eventually leveling up to Batman. His real name, Slade Wilson. See what I mean? Deadpool, Deathstroke, Wade, Slade. Yeah, Marvel totally does this stuff too, and maybe even a bit more, but we'll take a deeper dive into that in another video. For now, back to calling out DC. The Extremist, stolen from the Masters of Evil. Every now and again, when two rival comic companies try and outpace each other creatively, sometimes it helps to just do what the other guy is doing. Now granted, that advice may ring true for just about any entry on this list, but the Extremists, first coming onto the scene in 1990 by way of Justice League Europe number 15, are in a league all their own. These are not just a collection of DC homages to classic Marvel villains, but a nearly carbon copy of them. Acting as a play on the Masters of Evil, a group of villains introduced 26 years earlier in Avengers number 6 and reoccurring in Marvel, the Extremist roster includes Dr. Diehard, Dreamslayer, Gorgon, Lord Havoc, and Tracer, a seemingly eclectic group of creatively named foes. That is, until you begin comparing notes with Marvel. Diehard, a man who controls metal, Dreamslayer, an entity with the ability to match that of Doctor Strange's villain Dormammu, Gorgon, boasting a collection of tentacles he can control and make do his will, seemingly like Dr. Octopus of Spider-Man lore, and it goes on. With each DC Extremist comes another Master of Evil that did it first, rendering the Extremist ancillary villains not often seen in mainstream DC comics. Black Racer, stolen from Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer is one of the most iconic Marvel characters, thanks in large part to his surprisingly consistent appearance over the course of his existence. He is initially introduced in Fantastic Four number 48 in 1964 as the Herald of Galactus, searching the universe for a suitable world for his master to consume. Initially named Norrin Rad and hailing from the planet Zenla, the Surfer bargained with Galactus to spare his home, provided the Surfer finds substitutes. Speeding across the stars atop his signature surfboard, the Surfer nearly hands over Earth to Galactus before changing course and saving the planet. DC filled this niche of interplanetary flotation device travelers with Willie Walker, better known as the Black Racer, in the pages of New Gods number 3 in 1971. Oh, and this guy did not surf around on any lame silver board, no, he preferred skis. Black ones to be precise, if the name didn't give that away. Also, he serves a similar purpose to the Silver Surfer by bringing about death wherever he travels. The difference being that the Racer can deliver death all his own, while Surfer must rely on Galactus' destructive appetite. Imperia X Prime, stolen from Galactus. Hot on the stardust of the Silver Surfer is his master Galactus, one of the most recognizable Marvel antagonists in its canon. Debuting in the same issue, the World Eater is a gigantic being that hungers for an energy residing in planets capable of supporting life. He is essentially a god in the Marvel Universe, having unknown and untold cosmic powers. He is perpetually famished, frequently utilizing his herald, the Silver Surfer, to seek out further sustenance for him. Surfer finds Earth, warns of their impending doom, and watches as his master arrives ready to consume the planet. Imagine this scenario countless times and you can pretty much imagine the basic structure of any Galactus plot. It would also give you an insight into the inner workings of a lesser known DC villain, Imperia X Prime, a cosmic being first introduced in Superman number 153 around the turn of the century. Like his Marvel predecessor, Imperia X Prime is known as a destroyer of worlds and demonstrates this by arriving to consume Earth, only to be stopped by the unlikeliest of pairings, Superman and the villain Mongol. The latter also serves a Silver Surfer-like role in the story by arriving on the planet prior to Imperia X Prime and warning Superman of what is coming. The character has never reached the levels of Galactus and despite his name is certainly not ready for primetime. Red Lion, stolen from Black Panther. Try to guess who I'm describing. Leader of a fictional African nation who sports a costume resembling a big cat that bears an extremely defensible substance. While that understandably reminds most fans of Black Panther, DC's Red Lion simultaneously fits the description to a T. The latter is the hilariously named Matthew Bland, president of Berdunia and villain of the Justice League. He is first seen hiring the likes of Slade Wilson in 2016's Deathstroke Rebirth number 1, and it is positively arresting how much Lion's costume evokes T'Challa's, particularly with the cowl. Given the Black Panther first appeared in Fantastic Four's number 52 in 1966, it's actually astonishing it took DC this long to envision a counter to T'Challa. Perhaps it is to their credit that they made him bad, as the goodness of T'Challa is one of the things readers so adore about the character. An obvious attempt to differentiate the two, and given Red Lion's relatively recent birth, it could lead more compelling stories from him in the future. But time will only tell if he can step out of the shadows left by T'Challa in all mediums. serums. Swamp Thing stolen from Man-Thing. The characters of Ted Sallis and Alec Holland, along with their green alter egos, are so remarkably non-distinguishable from each other that it may as well serve as a mascot for this entire video. The former is a creature known as Man-Thing, introduced in Marvel in 1971 via Strange Tales #1, and the latter is Swamp Thing, created by DC and brought about in his modern form in 1972's Swamp Thing #1. Sallis begins your typical comic book scientist, hard at work on a potential super soldier serum before having to flee lackeys of advanced idea mechanics, or AIM, with his research. Wanting to keep it out of their hands, Sallis chooses to inject himself with the serum, and in his subsequent reaction, careens his car off into the swamp. The surrounding foliage and plant life overtake him, combining with the serum to create the Man-Thing. Now compare with Alec Holland's story, released more than a year later, also a scientist working on a secret formula whose research becomes the target of a greedy organization. This results in the organization's goons attempting to get said research, leading to the scientist being exposed to the serum he is working on and dying in a swamp, only to be resurrected by the plant life surrounding him and the formula he had taken. Seriously, that is Alec Holland's story too. Man-Thing and Swamp Thing resemble each other pre- and post-transformation, a rare feat for one of DC's ripoffs. Atomic Skull, stolen from Ghost Rider. These are just getting more and more blatant the further we go. Next up is the widely popular Ghost Rider, originally Johnny Blaze, who was brought to readers thanks to Marvel Spotlight #5, published in 1972. The spirit of vengeance, Ghost Rider is pretty easy to spot if you see his bike speeding past you on the street. The flaming skull, odd speech patterns, and aforementioned motorcycle all characterize a typical appearance of Blaze. The Atomic Skull is a slightly different story. The character began as a Superman villain named Albert Michaels in 1976's Superman #303 before eventually vanishing. Then the character received a revamp in the early 1990s, which saw an entirely new character adopt the mantle, Joseph Martin, who so obviously bears so many similarities to Ghost Rider. The characteristic flaming skull, even wider speech patterns, and his affinity for leather jackets and motorcycles all point to the Martin incarnation trying to ride the flames of Johnny Blaze. Really and truly, it would probably take a deal with the devil to bring Atomic Skull anywhere close to the fandom currently enjoyed by Ghost Rider. Lobo Stolen from Wolverine. He is often called the Wolverine of DC, and for good reason. The two share many traits that endear Lobo to fans of Logan, and vice versa. Wolverine ran onto the scene first with Incredible Hulk #180, published in 1974, that depicts the future X-Men character as a villainous bounty hunter employed by the Canadian government. He proceeds to target both the Hulk and Wendigo, whilst working to subdue both of them simultaneously. Eventually, Logan shows some redeeming traits when he begins helping the Jade Giant against Wendigo. Similarly, Lobo tries his hand initially as a villainous bounty hunter in 1983's Omega Men #3. That is, before going on to remake himself in the image of various other cynical, tortured anti-heroes who readers can't help but root for. Well, specifically one other cynical, tortured anti-hero readers can't help but root for. Further, the two characters share similar powers, as both have a healing factor and an excellent sense for tracking prey. And as a fan of the best there is, I'm pretty happy there is one more Logan clone running around. Black Alice, stolen from Rogue. Rogue has remained a popular member of the X-Men for years, owing in large part to her extended appearance in the popular cartoons of the 90s. Her powers have proven interesting as well, possessing the ability to absorb the power of another being given contact with their skin. She debuted in 1981 with Avengers Annual #10. Though as a bad guy helping the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants attack the Avengers. She would eventually turn to the X-Men for help after suffering from the memories she took from Carol Danvers and begin her journey towards the light. By the time DC thought to incorporate a roguelike character into their comics, the X-Men had already begun dominating at the box office, including a substantial role for Rogue in the films. The character's soaring popularity would lead to the introduction of Lori Zeklin, who would subsequently take on the name of Black Alice. Zeklin is first depicted in 2005's Birds of Prey #76 as a troubled student whose power levels require the surveillance efforts of the titular vigilante squad. Black Alice possesses nearly identical abilities to that of Rogue, having the power to take the magical essences and powers from other mystically inclined beings. So while her target demographic may not be as wide-ranging, the magical arts can certainly pack quite a punch when utilized by a skilled sorcerer. Black Alice still has a while to grow into her powers, but said powers, along with the similarity of the school setting that both characters are often relegated to, it's no doubt that DC also considered the same archetype that Rogue fulfills when conceiving of her. Now reflecting on this list, it bears repeating that both DC and Marvel possess characters worthy of informing future imaginations of superheroes. DC's Batman and Superman remain the two most recognizable superhero figures in the world, and fans of the characters can assuredly point to Marvel's catalog and pick out an imposter or two. Whichever company is your favorite, or even if you don't have one, DC and Marvel are exactly that. Companies focus on mass appeal and growth. In comic books, that means leaning into popular trends, significant social issues, and intriguing artistic designs that often ebb and flow with each new generation. A character of such longevity as Black Panther or Captain America may not feel accessible to new creators, prompting reimaginings of these same archetypes but in a different skin. On top of that, there are only really two major comic book publishers competing for our attention these days, resulting in an arms race of origin stories and tragic deaths to create the perfect superhero character. A pertinent question then presents itself. Will DC or Marvel create that character first? And how long before the other steals it? I have been Slice of Otaku of Plot Armor Comics. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.